Listen up. Hey, you built your practice to change lives, not manage money, and certainly not to drown in financial stress. But mismanaging cash flow is the biggest threat to your financial freedom. So today, I sat down with Sean Healy. He's the owner of Accounted For, and we uncovered the exact strategies practice owners need to take control of their money, scale your business, and fast track your retirement. This is an episode you guys definitely do not want to miss, so stay tuned.
I'm on a mission to help 200,000 practice owners achieve financial freedom. I'm Eric Miller, author of How to Become a Financial Beast. Download my free book today, A Practice Owner's Guide to Personal and Business Wealth You Never Thought Possible.
Hey, welcome back to the Financial Beast podcast, guys. I'm your host, Eric Miller, co-owner, chief advisor of Econologics Financial Advisors. We help healthcare owners achieve financial stability by giving them premier financial advice and guidance. We've been doing that for the last 17 years. Check us out at econologicsfinancialadvisors.com. And just a reminder, if you are brand new to the channel, do me a solid, give me some feedback, subscribe, do all the things that every other video says to do when it comes to their podcast. I would certainly appreciate that. So, okay, guys, we're going to talk numbers today. And to do that, I thought I would bring on someone that understands numbers. This is Sean Healy. He's the founder of Accounted For. They do advanced CFO services and bookkeeping for healthcare owners. The guy absolutely knows his stuff when it comes to practice finances, and we're gonna shoot the breeze on everything practice related today. So, welcome, Sean. Thanks for being on.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So when we met, obviously, I think we have a lot of similarities and things that we're trying to accomplish for practice owners. And one of the big things that we tend to say is, healthcare owners never learned finances in school. Clearly, it's something that they're good at healing patients, but when it comes to numbers, that's just not an area that they confront very much. Has that been your experience too in working with healthcare owners?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you look at, at least the education system, right? When you go to college, they don't really force you to take any business classes, let alone accounting, right? And accounting is its own language. So it can be very difficult to understand all that information when you've never had any of those base level classes. It just doesn't get taught.
Nope, it doesn't. But it is like when you look at a business owner, if you're new to owning a practice, it's like everyone's just like so focused on like, I got to get new patients and I got to make sure that we're treating them well. And then the money thing seems to be like an afterthought. And, if you have that approach, it's not going to take very long before you realize that money has its own rules. Money has its own, set of properties that happens. And if you don't treat it, like, and abide by those rules, then obviously you're going to have some trouble down the line.
Yeah. And there's a lot of unspoken, concepts that if you're just not aware of them, you don't know where to look. As I said, it can be very challenging and it can get very confusing. And I don't know about you, but I know most people I talk with, when they look at numbers, their eyes just kind of glaze over. So, to be able to take the time and actually review it and understand the story that the numbers are telling you, it takes a lot of understanding to be able to do so.
I think you said it right there. I think people don't realize that the numbers do tell a story, good, bad, or ugly. I mean, they do tell a story, and it's just a matter of like understanding what that story is and where you are in your trek. But I think the first thing we'll touch on is when the last time we talked, you had this kind of you shifted my viewpoint, when it comes to people's profit margin, because I think a lot of clients probably come to me, and say, hey, what should my profit margin be? And you had a pretty cool take on it. Why don't you tell everyone what that was? I'm not going to take credit for it. I'll let you, but I'm not going to take credit for it, right?
I think what's interesting is a lot of times whenever I ask anybody, what should the profit margin be? Everybody tends to throw out like 20%, right? Most professionals, finance, accounting tend to throw that percentage out there. And the approach we always take is, you need to make enough profit to get you to your goals. There's a big difference between profit and cash flow, and you need enough cash flow coming in to be able to get you to your goals, which is really where you come in, right? Because at the end of the day, most people want to make enough money to be able to retire appropriately. They want to make enough money for the business to give them the lifestyle that they're aiming for.
Go back on that.
Changes based off of who you speak with, right?
Yeah, go back on that difference between profit and cash flow, because I want to make sure people really understand that. Like, what is that? Just talk a little bit about that.
So, in a nutshell, when you spend money on something, all right, there's a difference between an expense and what you're spending your money on. So, profit is just an accounting term. So, the best way we've learned to explain it is profit is the language of accountants. EBITDA is the language of finance professionals, but cash flow is the language of entrepreneurs. It's the language of business owners. So what we found is whenever budgeting, whenever projecting, most other finance and accounting professionals tend to stop at profit, right? We want to shoot for that profit margin. But the question is, what are you doing with that profit? So the one thing that we found that most entrepreneurs aren't aware of, don't understand is there's a lot of things we spend our money on that specifically just stay on the balance sheet. All right. Most people tend to look at the P&L almost as like, that is the sole focus of the conversation. And it's very important, right? Your P&L is showing operationally how the business is performing. Your taxes are based off of that. But the funny thing is when you are making all this profit, so let's say we make $100,000, a good chunk of that is going to taxes.
Yep.
And for most S corporations, LLCs, unless you're a C corp, your taxes are really your personal taxes. So what happens is whenever you're making a tax payment, that's really a draw out of the business. That doesn't land on your P&L. Most professionals, try to advise to save for a rainy day, to save for, future capital expenditures. Those different saving strategies come out of your profit. Then, you got your owner compensation.
Right.
Some business owners are on salary on payroll. Others are, taking draws or distributions or some form of a guaranteed payment. If you're taking a draw or distribution, that once again comes out of your profit number.
Which is not a line item on the profit and loss statement at all.
Line item on the profit and loss.
But those are pretty important, quote unquote, expenses. I guess you could say
big quote unquote expenses.
Yeah.
Right? Most people, because I'm spending the money, it has to be an expense. Most people think of, if I'm making profit, I'm making money. But if you're saving some of that profit, if you're taking some of that profit for yourself, if you have liabilities that you're making principal payments on, the only thing landing on that P&L is the interest. So what happens is, same with like asset purchases, right? So what happens is that, a business owner makes $100,000 in profit and they go, oh, I can take 100 for myself. But really, 30 of it, 40 of it probably went to taxes. So let's say 30 went to taxes. So now you're down to 70. You had that SBA loan or the EIDL loan that, a lot of people took during COVID. Let's call that $5,000. Well, now you're down another $5,000. Then we had, we bought a bunch of computers for the office. Now we're down another $5,000. We wanted to save, $10,000, $20,000 for a rainy day. Now we're down that. And so all of a sudden we're sitting there looking at our profit saying, hey, we made $100,000. Then we're looking at our bank account. We're down 40, 50,000 because of all these items. And, our CPA tells us, hey, you owe all this tax money. And you're like, I can barely make payroll right now. What do you mean I have a tax payment? Like I don't have any money in the bank to make this payment. So it's a disconnect. We refer to it as the gap.
Yes.
It's a gap in the conversation because most professionals are looking at that P&L but there's other things that are going on that you need to project, you need to budget for, and you need to make consistent, unfortunately.
How do you do that with people then?
How do we do it personally?
Yeah.
We are fortunate. We built a tool a couple years ago that actually projects out our clients' finances. So instead of the way we look at it is it's really hard to have a cash flow conversation and make proactive business decisions if you're always looking backwards. So the best analogy is if you're driving a car, if you're just staring in the rear view mirror the whole time, which is kind of what your bookkeeping and your financials are, if you're just staring in the rear view mirror, you're probably going to crash at some point. So what we did is we built a tool that helps our business owners look forward and project out their profit. And then once they are profitable, so if they're struggling with profitability, that's where you start. Once we know they are profitable, then we start trying to build budgets for what should we be saving for, right? Should we be saving for taxes each month? What should owners' compensation be? We look at owners' comp, it's how much do you need to survive? Because that needs to be something we budget from day one. Otherwise, you're going to be taking money out of the business, whether you want it or not, right? What do you need to be comfortable? Which is kind of what we like. That's like level 2 what we shoot for. And then once they have a steady profit, what do you need to retire? Because we want the business to be able to bring you enough revenue or enough profits that you can be putting away for the long term. And that's where we would bring, like, Eric, that's where we bring you in, right?
Yeah.
That's where we need to, you need a personal plan, and then we need a business plan to make sure that it's feeding you enough money to get you to that goal.
Is it harder to walk back someone to that approach that has been unprofitable for a long time to get them to a profitability standpoint as opposed to someone that's kind of doing well, and there's a profit margin, but they just spend it all because they don't know what the hell they're supposed to be doing? I've always heard that it's more difficult to walk back to solvency and profitability, if that term makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely more difficult if you're not making enough profit.
Yeah.
To, allow
cover your taxes, cover your
business to survive and pay your taxes. Then it's definitely an uphill battle because there's a lot of decisions that need to be made. And I think what a lot of people tend to fall to is if all of a sudden their, we'll call it their business algorithm, their business model, if it's not sustainable. And we realize that a lot of individuals, when they hit PPP, like with COVID, when they got the PPP loans, that's when a lot of the business models changed because they had an influx of cash come in, a lot lower expenses because some employees were on furlough, and there was a lot of times where the money coming in really didn't always match up with the money going out because it came in such a large lump sum. It was almost like a windfall. So everything
that saved a lot of people's balance sheets.
It saved a lot of people, but it also hurt a lot of people in the long run. Because when you get a windfall, you spend them.
That's right.
They saw money in the bank, so it's like everything's okay. Yet there were underlying problems that went unaddressed.
Yeah, the habits of how you handle money coming into the organization are something that you have to establish early on. The sooner the better. In what you're talking about right now. And in that, and our philosophy is, hey, when a dollar comes into your organization, you need to know where 99.9% of that money is going to go before it even comes in. Like what are the accounts or expenses that money's going to go? And obviously those, your personal tax liability, your profits have to be part of that equation. And I just think that when you look at most practice owners, they wildly underestimate how much their business actually needs to be doing for them to live their ideal life. They just wildly underestimate it. I think they only think, hey, if I'm just bringing enough in to barely pay myself and to cover all the expenses on my P&L, I'm good, with a small profit margin. And that's where we're always like, no, you're going to always struggle if you take that approach right there.
It kind of makes sense though, right? Because, if money is something that you don't understand and numbers are something that are scary to you, which is most individuals, by the way, kind of an out of sight, out of mind, right? Until all of a sudden cash flow is really a problem, I don't want to look this in the eye. So one of the things we try to do is we build a cadence with our clients where we almost force them to look at everything at least once a month, because we want to make sure that you have an understanding, good or bad. We want you to know where you're at. If
Yes.
there's a day in the future where you're going to run out of money, I want that to be, I don't want that to come as a surprise. And unfortunately, what we tend to find is when cash flow's tight, there's a really big emotional response that comes with it. So we always refer to as drowning.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, cash flow is really tight, and we know that we're scratching and clawing for every dollar. Whenever you get that drowning feeling that sets in, what do people tend to do? They work harder, they take on more clients or more patients. They tend to do more, but a lot of times, they're kicking, right? If you're drowning, you're just going to start kicking. But if you're kicking in the wrong direction, which a lot of business owners tend to do, because they'll bring on clients that they're actually losing money on.
Yeah. Not only that, or they'll start just to do an automatic cut of like really important things that they need.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that's another thing that we've seen, like when people get into a cash flow crunch like that, it's like the first and obvious response is, oh, I better just go cut. And you're never going to economize your way into profitability.
No.
It just doesn't happen. Like you have to make sure that expenses are things that are going to provide more value to the business long term, or short term. But you have to look for revenue enhancements as well.
Oh yeah, a lot of time it is cutting, but it's cutting revenue streams. I mean, it's if you have a carrier that you're losing money on every time you go and do that visit, it's time to cut your lowest carrier. A lot of times it's just holding certain employees accountable. You need employees to be able to pay for themselves, and if they're not seeing enough visits, it's really easy to turn to that employee and be like, you're just not doing your job. Yet sometimes it's the marketing. If not enough new patients come in, how can they do that job? And it's hard to identify that underlying, lever or trigger without kind of diving into some of the data and saying, like, is it this particular location that's holding us back? Is it this particular team? Is it this particular revenue stream?
Yep.
You have to identify the problem, bring self-awareness to it before you can make the appropriate change.
Man, that's so good, because it is true. It's like the emotional response of, oh my God, I'm drowning. I like the way you put that. I'm drowning, is that you're just going to kick and you're going to do all these stupid motions, as opposed to just probably trying to stay calm and say, what is the reason for the deficiency? Like I have to go inspect. Okay. Is it my front desk person that's not scheduling people as it should? Is it my biller who's not collecting what I should, what is the discrepancy? Because there's a number I should be making every month. Okay. That allows me to be solvent. And when I say solvent, people always just automatically assume solvency is just barely getting by. No, solvency to me is like where you have excess. Okay. Where you have, more than what you need.
Yeah.
Which includes your taxes, your owner compensation, and reinvestment back into the business. So, I think that I lost my train of thought right there.
No worries. Let me stop you there, though. Just because one of the things, though, is we make it sound so easy. Of like, of course you should.
It's true. It's true. We do. We do make it sound easy.
It's such a typical human response, and as it should be, right? I mean, look, you and I have run our own companies.
Yeah.
You and I have hit moments, I'm sure, I know for a fact that I have, where you make a decision, you take a risk, and you know that financially speaking, in the long term, it's going to pay off. But in the short term, you're going to feel that cash flow crunch.
Mm-hmm.
The hard part is when a lot of these things are happening, it's just staying self-aware to it. We're not immune to that response.
Right.
No matter how much I talk about this, no matter how much I know it just in my bones, I'm going to have that response. The trick is, when you have the response, taking a deep breath, being self-aware of it and going, okay, sometimes it's, I have a business coach myself, right? It's making sure that I'm talking to other individuals about it. I'm getting feedback from them and making sure that, hey, this is my plan of attack. Is it emotionally charged? Or am I making a good decision? And it's making sure that when people give you that feedback, it's taking it in, it's thinking through it, And it's just trying to approach it in a very logical manner, being intentional about the decisions or the cuts or the direction of the company. It's making sure you're just being intentional around that.
What's your confidence level that you could take any business and tell them exactly what they need to bring in to satisfy all the things that they need to do?
Ooh. So you and I don't live in a world of guarantees, but
like let's say a veterinary practice owner comes to you. Well, we'll take PT because I know you do a lot of PTs, but okay.
Either one.
Yeah, and you see their numbers, okay, and you look at their profit and loss statements, and obviously you're gonna have to ask some other questions, in regards to that. But how confident are you that you could obviously it's not going to be down to the exact penny, but you could give them a number of exactly what they need to bring in to satisfy everything.
Yeah, I mean, from a break-even perspective, yes, we can always turn around and tell you you know what it is. I think we can tell you what needs to happen.
Yeah,
I can tell you where the problems are.
Mm-hmm.
I can't always tell you the solution to that problem. So, like an example is, you're overstaffed. We can dive in and figure out, is admin really high? But why your admin is high? Or whether it's because there's internal inefficiencies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it's because there's a few people on staff you just really like and you just don't want to let them go, right? There's certain things
you're afraid to let that person go. Yeah,
I'm afraid it'll impact culture, right? I think it's the execution of some of these, or hypothetically, revenues just stop coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Whether there's a break in billing processes, whether the insurance carriers are doing something, how many insurance carriers just stopped paying this year?
Yeah.
We know of one or two.
Mm-hmm.
The solution to that is not always something that we could, there's extra steps that have to happen on the operational side, but we can turn around and say, hey, here are where the problems are. We can kind of do that point and shoot mentality, or, hey, marketing, you're not bringing enough people on.
Yep.
I'm not going to be able to help you find new patients or help with that marketing or help with that recruiting, but we can tell you from a capacity standpoint, you're under capacity. You need at least 3-4 more new hires to be able to get to where you need to be. It's, your biggest expense right now is not on a financial statement. Your biggest expense is opportunity cost. You need 3 more people to bring enough revenue for the team that you built. And so it's, yes, I think we can always...
You call it opportunity cost, and I think that's a great word for it. Opportunity cost, which is just another way of saying the biggest expense, which is not on your profit and loss statement, is the difference between because everyone has a building and they have a service facility that they can see patients out of. And there is a number of what that facility could produce at an optimum level that I would bet, and maybe you should start asking people this, because I'm just curious, how many people actually know, like, your next 10 clients or your next 10 prospects that you're looking at, like, ask them, do they know what their facility capacity income potential is for their practice? And I would be shocked if 8 out of 10, or if 3 out of 10 knew what that number was.
Most, I'd say 90% do not. No, mind you, and it's not an easy, because there's a couple factors that go into that.
There are.
Like,
but I mean, you take a PT practice that, let's say I got a 3,000 square foot facility or something like that. I don't know, based upon numbers I've always heard, it should be, that's around 320 patient visits at max.
300 a week, give or take.
That you could do. Okay, based upon your average reimbursement and, some other factors. What is it that this facility could do? Like, I just think that's a number that too many people don't know. And I was always shocked at that, because it's just like, that is the highest and best use of this investment asset that you have right now. Let's try to get it to that number, because that is the number that's going to, not only is going to give you the highest profit margin, but it's also going to equate to the highest enterprise value when you go to sell at some point in time.
Well, and it's, hey, I want to grow. I want to get more locations. Well, let's make sure we're maximizing the space we have currently.
Yeah. How many people I've seen that so many times. It just drives me batty. Like, I'm just going to open another location. I'm like, but you're like 40% at capacity right here, and you're not even profitable at this one.
Yeah.
Like, why are you going to go open another location for?
It can be tough, though. I mean, we refer to, so we have an exercise we refer to as capacity and constraints, where we want to figure out what your capacity is for the people that you have and the hours that they're treating, your marketing efforts and what that should be bringing in. And then we want to figure out capacity from a location perspective. And ideally, when you look at all three of those at the same time, one of them is the constraint. And it's not always the one that you think. You might have all these people, but your marketing efforts are the marketing goals you're setting are well over and above what your people can even say. You need to know kind of what your capacity looks like, but where that constraint is, so that you can open it up.
Yes.
It is difficult, though, and it's hard to comprehend, and there's a lot of math that's involved. But
there is, man. But I think it's got to start here. Before you start. I don't know, before you start hiring a bunch of coaches and consultants and all these things, I mean, you got to know what your numbers are. I think, because to your point, you're going to uncover the areas that are problematic, whether it's marketing, whether it's, admin, whether it's, whatever it is. And that's when you can kind of strategically go, okay, well, I need help with this. I need help with the marketing. I need a marketing consultant, or maybe I need help with someone that can help me understand, this systems and operational efficiencies a little bit better. Or maybe it's me. Maybe I need a checkup from the neck up myself on being a better executive. How do I become a better executive and get my people to kind of get, part of this process as well,
or it's what does Jamie Schreier always refer to it as, the self-limiting belief, right?
Yeah,
sometimes you're holding yourself back because of your internal dialogue. Yeah, it can be challenging, and sometimes you have to navigate that, right? Sometimes it's you don't realize the potential of your organization until put on paper.
Yeah. That's pretty amazing, man. I didn't realize how deep you guys went on that aspect of it. But I guess that is really what a CFO would do, right? I mean,
accountants are really good at looking backwards. I think the idea of where a lot of CFO professionals come into play is the goal is to help you look forward and to help guide you on what decisions you need to make. Because, we can cut office supplies. Yeah, we can cut all the stuff by 50%.
Yeah.
You can cut all your expenses by 50%. If you just impacted your labor and were a little more effective in your labor, or your efficiency of your team by like 5%, it has such a bigger impact to the bottom line, because it's kind of the 80-20 rule, right? Like 80% of your expenses tend to be labor, benefits, rent. Your rent's not changing because you have a contract for the next 10 years.
Right.
So that's the one thing we should probably focus our time and energy on, the thing that moves the needle. The rest is good, and a lot of times it's low-picking fruit. But if you really want to make change to the bottom line, you need to impact the P&L line items that really impact the bottom line.
Yeah. Any other things that you see that clients have is when they first come to you, that you just any patterns that you've noticed, or things they miss? I'm sure there's a ton of them. I mean, to put you on the spot here, but
I think the biggest one is most people manage their finances and do bookkeeping, right? Simply to fill out a tax return.
Okay.
Whereas one of the things I always recommend is really manage your financials or manage your books so that you could sell your business tomorrow. I know, like my team, we do all the bookkeeping for our clients because we just found it's easier to do it correctly and to break data out to make decisions rather than having to clean somebody's books each month. It requires so much extra work and so much extra communication, where if we kind of take the lead, you can manage things like, I know my ad backs all the time. I know my EBITDA, and I have a clear EBITDA line in case I want financing or I want to sell. I know my profit, and I can project my profit, so I can now project my tax payments. Like a lot.
Hey, Sean, explain to people the difference between, like, I guess, the profit and the EBITDA, because I think just from your perspective.
In the most simplistic terms,
Yeah.
your EBITDA is your profit minus all the made up numbers. So that's the best way. It's, amortization, interest, depreciation, all the things that are not going to actually impact your bank account or your cash flow. EBITDA is really just like your operating income, right? It's how the business is truly performing. All the other stuff is rules made up to allow you to expense a piece of equipment or interest on a loan. It's not stuff that's really impacting your day-to-day cash flow, but it's going to impact your profit. The goal is that, you manage expenses accordingly to show an appropriate EBITDA, because that's, if you're trying to sell, that's what your multiplier is based on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. And I don't think that's changing. That is the biggest, I would say, value driver of a sale as well that we've seen. What is that number? So it's a really important number. Obviously, you want it to be as big as possible, but that's really good. Explain a little bit about how you guys operate and how you work with people, because I think it's a super valuable service, and I want to make sure people really understand exactly what is it you guys are going to be doing and looking at, in 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah. So, I mean, our typical client is usually somebody providing a service. We really do focus on more service-based companies. I'd say 89% of our book of business now is working with private practice owners. We just found that there's a really good fit. PT tends to be an amazing fit because most PTs have played a sport before. They understand the concept of a coach, having somebody on the sideline giving you guidance, pushing you, driving you. They understand that mentality.
Right.
Our model tends to fit with that rather well, because what we try to do is we try to manage your data. So I break it up into 3 pieces. You have data, manage data management, which is kind of that base, right? Without good data, it's really hard to bring good insight. So we manage the data and we manage it to make better business decisions. All right. The next piece is insight, which we built a bunch of different technologies. We have a lot of different exercises that we do, that our goal is to be able to help clients use that data. And the final piece is action, right? We want to be able to, you got the data management, you got the insight. The final piece is that take action. We built a cadence with our clients. Some we meet with quarterly, some we meet with monthly. Some of our larger clients that need a lot more support, we'll meet with them literally every single week. Those are the ones that we really are acting a lot more like in that CFO capacity for.
Yeah.
And what we try to do is we try to hold them accountable to take action. We try to guide them through making decisions. As I said, we have a lot of different exercises that we can dive deeper into, where some of these problems are. Sometimes it's diving, into more granular internal data. Sometimes it's improving certain workflows. But the whole goal is, how do we take the information or start gathering the information to make better decisions?
Yeah.
Right? How do we start making sure that we switch from lagging indicators to leading indicators? What should we put our energy in? How do we track this? And then how do we make sure that our whole team actually understands what the goals are? Do we even have goals, right?
Yeah.
Kind of walking them through a lot of those processes and trying to translate all the noise that is accounting and bookkeeping, trying to translate all that data into something that is palatable, something that they can take action on, and making sure that we're there as an accountability partner each and every month to make sure that they're taking the necessary steps and showing them the ROI of some of those steps.
Yeah. The service that you offer is just, I think, is it's incredible. People sometimes get us confused as they're like, well, are you guys doing the same thing? I'm like, no, not even close. Okay. They are, obviously we don't do bookkeeping, and we're certainly, we'll give some I'll try to get people to look at some of the things you talked about in terms of how to distribute their profits, how to make sure that you're accounting for it and treating it like an expense and making it part of your make break number. But we don't do anywhere near the deep dive that you guys do on that. We certainly haven't created any software on that. Obviously our job is to make sure that the money, the business is providing what it needs to not only for it to grow and expand and to make sure that it's valuable, but to make sure that your household, your parent company, which is what we call it, your household, is also growing and expanding at the same time. And you're creating other income sources, and obviously you're managing your debt and protecting your assets and everything that a financial advisor does. But that's our area of expertise.
Oh yeah, and that's something we don't touch on.
Yeah.
It's funny when we see a lot of these, when we dive into a new client and we see some problems, we try to always make sure that they have an advisor. Like, your business is the 5 people you surround yourself with, just like you are.
Yep.
And it's amazing how many individuals don't have they don't know how much money they're spending each month. They don't know what their retirement goal is. And
Nope.
So a lot of times when we hit that point in the conversation, we're like, do you have a financial advisor? Do you know how much you need to retire? The second they say no, it's like, okay.
Yeah.
We're bringing Eric in then. We're bringing somebody in to have a conversation with you, because without that, how do you know which direction the business needs to go if you don't have that end goal? It's a constant challenge and a constant roadblock that we run into, like, rather consistently.
Yeah, the business is obviously an asset of the household, and there's a bigger picture here that we have to look at. So yeah, it makes total sense. Well, man, thank you so much. This has been great, really has. And how do people get a hold of you if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah, so you can go to our website, www.accountedfor, ACCOUNTED, the number 4, LLC.com. And, reach out. We always do a free assessment before, for anybody that's just interested in seeing what their numbers look like. Or, before bringing clients on, we always try to make sure we understand, try to pop the hood and know what we're getting into. But
Yep.
Yeah, love to have a conversation, or just if anybody ever has any questions, we're just here as a resource.
I highly recommend that you guys reach out to them to make sure that you are establishing order in your practice. You cannot expand on chaos. So let's make sure that we have our numbers in order. Okay, thanks, Sean. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate you, Eric.